Good morning, members of the MAG Intelligent Transportation Systems Committee. This meeting is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table in the hallway and give it to MAG staff. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table by the door. If you purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. We will now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I call your name, please indicate you are present for the record. Albert Garcia.
Present.
Mike Sutton. Here. Steve McKenzie.
Here.
Catherine Hull.
Here.
Sergeant Hunt.
Present.
Dr. Shusang Zhu.
Present. Thank you.
David Lucas.
Here.
John Kraft for Christopher Wanamaker.
Here.
Hong Ho.
Here.
John Willett.
Present.
Kieran Jordan.
Present.
Marty Zeke.
Present.
Raquel Schatz.
Here.
Tessa Wessel. Is there anyone I have missed?
Alyssa Dahl from City of Chandler.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, we have quorum.
Sorry, this is Tessa from City of El Mirage. My computer wasn't working for a second.
Thank you, Tessa.
Good morning, this is Susan Anderson at ADOT.
Mr. Chair, we have quorum.
Okay, thank you. With that, our next item is called to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. I have received 0 requests to speak cards for this agenda item. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website 1 hour prior to the meeting. Staff, do we have any written comments for this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As of today, no comments were received.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next item. Our next item is approval of the March 1st, 2023 meeting minutes. Does any member of the committee have any revisions? Okay, hearing none.
Mr. Chair,
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to note a revision that was done by Sergeant Hunt, indicating that he was present in person and not virtually at the last meeting.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes as changes noted?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion from Kathy and a second from Mike. For those present in the room only, can I have a voice vote? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Staff, can you take a roll call of the members participating virtually?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For those online, when I call your name, please indicate how you vote. I will start with John Kraft for Christopher Wanamaker.
Aye.
Alyssa Dahl.
Aye.
David Lucas.
Aye.
Hong Ho.
Aye.
John Willett.
Aye.
Marshall Regal.
Yay.
Marty Zeke.
Aye.
Micah Hendry for City of Mesa.
I approve.
Raquel Schatz.
Aye.
Susan Anderson.
Aye.
Tony Abbott,
Aye, and I apologize. I just joined, so if you can also add me as being at the meeting, please.
will do. Thank you, Tony. Tessa Wessel,
Aye.
thank you. Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 4. Our next item is a report from MAG TSMO Program Manager, Jeff Chank. This item is for information and discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, member of ITS committee. The first item on my report is the federal update. I would like to invite our local FHW division, Kieran Jordan, to provide that update. Kieran?
Thank you, Jeff. Next slide, please. I first want to talk about the SMART Grants program. The program was established to provide grants to eligible public sector entities to conduct demonstration projects focused on advanced smart community technologies and in order to improve transportation efficiency and safety. Arizona was granted 2 SMART grants in fiscal year 2022. One was for the Arizona Commerce Authority and one for the city of Phoenix. Next slide, please. Currently, there are 4 active grants with notices of funding going on right now. The first being the PROTECT grant. The bipartisan infrastructure law established the PROTECT grant in the amount of $250 million per year to help make surface transportation more resilient to natural hazards, including climate change, sea level rise, flooding, extreme weather events, and other natural disasters through supportive planning activities, resilience improvements, community resilience evacuation routes, and at-risk coastal infrastructure. Applications are due by August 18th, 2023. Next slide, please. The Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. The purpose of this grant is to improve roadway safety by significantly reducing or eliminating roadway fatalities and serious injuries through safety action plan development and refinement. The program provides funding to develop the tools that help strengthen a community's approach to roadway safety and save lives designed to meet the needs of diverse local, tribal, and regional communities that differ dramatically in size, location, and experience administering federal funding. Applications must be submitted by July 10, 2023 at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Next slide, please. The Wildlife Crossing Pilot Program helps carry out projects by certain federal, tribal, state, and local governments, including municipalities, counties, and others that reduce wildlife collisions and improve habitat connectivity for terrestrial and aquatic species. The funding is in the amount of $111 million and may be used for construction or non-construction projects, and a maximum federal share may be funded with 80% will be 80% of the project costs, as is standard with federal aid projects. Applications are due by August 1st, 2023. Next slide, please. The last grant I have is the Reduction of Truck Emissions at Port Facilities Grant Program. This program provides funding in the amount of $80 million per year to reduce idling at port facilities, including the electrification of port operations, and applications are due by June 26, 2023. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Kieran. I'd like to thank you for keeping us well informed of these funding opportunity, as well as facilitating the pursuit of them. I'd like to congratulate the IM for the winning proposal, as well as the city of Phoenix. The IM proposal is in collaboration with several regional agencies, ADOT, MACDOT, as well as MAG. Next item, please. Well, we're reaching the end of the FY 2023, and here's an update of where all these TSOP projects stand. As committee remembered that we have 2 waves of TISA projects, that darker sections representing the first wave, it literally started last fall, and some of them due to the different project schedules, they are still going on, but they are all in the final stage, being the final reporting stage. And then the lighter sections are those that the committee has approved relatively recently as the second wave of those projects. And they are all in the different stages, but just want to point out, other than the bottom one, which is in Maricopa, City of Maricopa, that has one of the two corridors that would now need to be postponed to July, or others, we are pretty much on schedule. We'll finish it by end of the fiscal year. Next slide, please. Well, this is long-awaited synchro training. Synchro is the traffic signal optimization tool for the regions. It was a joint procurement a couple of decades ago, and that all agencies and consultants are now learned to use for traffic signal timing optimization. So MAG has been providing these synchro training on a yearly basis. This year is coming. We're offering a 2 days training at the MAG.gov IT facilities. And to provide flexibility, we offer two options. The first one is June 5th and 6th. The other is June 7th and 8th. Please note the seating is limited, and that back for explanations. Actually, many of us have been to the MAG.gov training facility, and there was a computer training room, but it's no longer there. But MAG.gov has courteously offered to help. The IT will actually set up some training computer in the meeting room now, and therefore the capacity has been reduced from previously 15 to 10. So what this means is for this go around, we have a total of 20 seats available. So please expect an email, or if you want to send an email inquiry to Omar, who is organizing the synchro training. Next item. I would like to invite the president of the ITS Arizona, Michelle Bakley, to provide an update on the ITS Arizona.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the MAG ITS committee. Thanks for the opportunity to provide a few updates today. The first is advertisement of our upcoming conference, which is planned September 20th and 21st. It's going to be held at the same location at the Mesa Convention Center. We have a lot of great things planned for this year, so we encourage you to add this to your calendar. Registration will be opening this week. And if you have any questions, I'd encourage you to reach out to Srini Gunla or myself. Srini is the current conference chair. He can be reached at vicepresident@itsaz.org. Next slide, please. I'm also here to promote and advertise our internship program opportunity. We have one $5,000 grant available. This is open to both public agencies and private employers. The intent is to subsidize the cost of bringing on a new intern or the cost of continuing an existing intern. We hope with this program, we're able to give some more experience and on-the-job training for folks that are looking to come into our industry. And through this program, we also hope to give professional development opportunities by involving them in the ITS Arizona board, bringing them to our events, and encouraging them to present at our annual conference in September. Next slide, please. So there's a lot more information on our website on the program at itsaz.org. For consideration in the program, we ask you to submit an employer letter of interest as well as intern resume by May 15th, a little less than 2 weeks from today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. That's president@itsaz.org. I think that's all for my updates, and I'll turn it back over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Michelle. Like to thank ITS Arizona for promoting this public-private partnerships that we are all in to promote the ITS in this region. Things like this internship program has in the past benefited many jurisdictions that participated as well as the consulting firm. So please note the date. I mean, there are going to be competitions, but it's a great opportunity to bring in new talents. I think this concludes my program manager's report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jeff. Do any members have any questions or comments? Okay, if you do, please contact Jeff after the meeting. We'll go ahead and proceed to item number 5. Item number 5 is regarding project updates from the Regional Fiber Upgrade Task Force. This item is for information, discussion, and possible action. I'd like to invite Jeff Jenk to provide an overview of this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The SMNO plan of MAG has identified a priority project for the region. That is to maintain this region's critical infrastructure called Regional Community Network, a dedicated fiber backbone that's solely used by the transportation as well as the public safety. And so MAG RCN program manager Ryan Gish is here. I mean, he's the one that's spearheading this effort. And so he runs the fiber upgrade task force. And this task force is reporting to the ITS. And in the past that the task force has identified these critical projects that we could help to improve the RCN operations. So with that, I would like to turn it to Ryan.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the ITS committee. Usually when we have one of these task force meetings, we don't have them very often, but when we do, I think it's nice to give you guys an update of what happened and any of the previous projects we had completed. So next slide, please. Just a quick update from our meeting. We did go over the completion of a recent project with City of Surprise along State Route 303 or Loop 303. Pretty quick completion, went through pretty smooth, about 2 miles of braided fiber. About 1.5 was from a previous purchase that MAG or this committee had approved on about a year ago to purchase fiber. Aside from that, benefit Surprise, ADOT and McDOT is helping with a lot of traffic mitigation up there at 163rd Avenue corridor. Also at our task force meeting, we discussed just kind of basic parts of the project and development. Also went back and reviewed our checklist that we have for upcoming projects. They have to meet certain, I guess, fiber needs and certain requirements. Next slide, please. And then with that, we also discussed any other future projects we had. We were kind of on a tight schedule with about 2 months left here in our fiscal year, but one project seemed promising and everybody agreed on this project and proposing it to the ITS committee here. This would be with City of Phoenix. It's a fiber extension along 19th Avenue, starting the north end at 101 and bringing it all the way down to Greenway. As you can see on the map, it represents existing in red and blue with the proposed additional. Again, it would be about 3.5 miles of fiber being pulled through existing conduit. And the fiber would be using fiber that was previously purchased a year ago. This is benefiting City of Phoenix, their multiple departments within their jurisdiction, also McDOT, and also with the Regional Community Network. With that, I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, unless you guys have any questions.
It's fine. Thank you, Ryan. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, hearing none. Is there a motion to recommend approval of FY 2023 Regional Fiber Upgrade Support Project for the City of Phoenix?
Move to approve.
We have a motion from Bruce
I'll second.
and a second from Kathy. For those present in the room only, can I have a voice vote? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Staff, can you take a roll call of the members participating virtually?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For those online, when I call your name, please indicate how you vote. I will start with Tony Abel,
Aye.
Susan Anderson,
Aye.
Micah Henry,
I approve.
Alyssa Dahl,
Aye.
Hong Ho.
Aye.
David Lucas,
Yay.
Marshall Rigo,
Aye.
Raquel Schatz,
Aye.
John Kraft,
Aye.
Tessa Wessel, John Willett,
Aye.
Marty Zeke.
Aye.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I have missed? Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
With that, we'll move on to item number 6, which is an update on the newly adopted MAG Regional Transportation Plan, Momentum 2050, and the Regional Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Investment Plan. This item is for information and discussion. I'd like to invite Jeff Jink to provide an overview of this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In June of 2021, MAG has developed and then was universally adopted by the Regional Council, the RTP, Momentum 2050. And that links to the future of the extension of the Prop 400 half-cent sales tax. Today, I'm happy to have Ms. Audra Thomas, who led this monumental effort in developing the RTP, to provide an update of where we stand. Audra?
Thank you, Mr. Jink. Chairman, members of the ITS committee, thank you so much for inviting me to present today. Indeed, we've spent the last 4 years developing and unanimously approving a plan by your mayors, and are now in our second year in partnership with the Arizona legislature to enable Maricopa County to ask our voters for a continuation of the dedicated half-cent sales tax, first passed by voters back in 1985, and is instrumental. The reason we have the transportation infrastructure we do have in this region today. Omar, next slide. I'm going to provide a little bit of an update on where we stand in terms of the extension of Proposition 400. It is the fundamental funding source here in Maricopa County that contributes not just to the investment plan itself, but as mentioned by Mr. Jank, the regional transportation plan, which is our federally required planning document that covers the entirety of our planning area. Next slide. I'm going to start with a little bit of background because I think it's always important to emphasize where we've come and perhaps take for granted the investments for which we have made. Next slide. Ultimately, the dedicated half-cent sales tax came about after mayors heard from ADOT that it would take 60 years to construct the initial Loop 101 here in the Phoenix metropolitan area. For those of you not wanting to do math this morning, we still will not have constructed the 101. We are still within that 60-year timeframe, recognizing at a time in the late 70s and early 80s that we were rapidly growing. Mayors knew that they couldn't stand for that, came together with the business community to identify solutions forward, and ultimately determined to tax themselves to do what the state wasn't going to do, which is build a transportation network here in the growing metropolitan region. And that is what led to Proposition 300. At the time, it was one of the first sales tax initiatives in the country dedicated for transportation infrastructure. Those of you, as you go and work with peers across the country, now know rapidly replicated throughout the country as a funding mechanism. Constituents love transportation. They routinely vote in favor of these initiatives because they know how important transportation is to their quality of life and economic prosperity. We followed that initiative up after 20 years with Proposition 400, also passed at the ballot. And we are in our final years of that investment today. Next slide. So I want to start and remind ourselves where we came from. This is the network as it existed in 1986, Interstate 17 through the region, but even Interstate 10 was not complete yet. For those of you who have been here for a couple of decades, you'll know and remember when I-10, the last segment of Interstate 10, ocean to ocean, was completed here just north of us through the Deck Park Tunnel, and that was in the early 1990s. This was the system that we had, and many folks who have been here for several decades will tell stories about using the arterial grid network to get from point A to point B. It still does carry about half of our commuting traffic every single day and is the backbone of our transit and active transportation infrastructure. Next slide. This is what Proposition 300 delivered. Loops 101, 202, 51, and 143. Next slide. And after 20 years, we came back with Proposition 400, delivering the 303, the South Mountain Freeway, establishing light rail here in the region, streetcar opening just last year. What you don't see on this slide are the iterative general purpose lanes, the high occupancy vehicle lanes, the traffic interchanges that were added to these system investments. You don't see the over 7 million operating service miles of bus transit that the region funds every single year. You don't see the ADA paratransit. Nearly the entire funding source is Proposition 400 that serves our most vulnerable residents here in the region, our seniors and disabled. You don't see the 250 miles of arterial roads that Proposition 400 has built. In addition to that, as part of the entire package, important investments that you are all aware of in ITS and safety, as well as active transportation. Next slide. It matters. The freeway network alone saves you an average of 105 hours each year, time that you get to spend with your family or doing more fun things. Most of our jobs are located within a mile or two of a rail or freeway corridor, and you can see the compounding benefit of transportation investments unlocking economic potential. You'll see the valuation increasing within just proximity of these investments. 200-300% valuation compared to an average of 150% valuation increase over the same time period throughout the county. Next slide. It's our competitive advantage. Our friends at the Texas A&M Transportation Institute certainly remark on this annually, putting Phoenix at the top of their list in terms of best travel times and levels of congestion. This is why companies continue to move here. They recognize this value. They recognize the transportation investment that we have made. It becomes our economic competitive advantage. Next slide. It matters because it's creating jobs. Our friends at the Greater Phoenix Economic Partnership down the street has put this together. You see where their locates over the last 30 years have been, and it's no surprise. It's within proximity of our major transportation system. Next slide. And most importantly, and I'm showing my bias here, the community gets it, our public gets it. When we started this endeavor over 5 years ago, we started with some basic research out into the community, better understanding what our constituents' values were so that we could build a plan that protected those values and responded to the values, the things that make this region unique, why people stay here, why people choose to move here. And what we learned was that our transportation system has considerably high approval ratings from our constituents. Many want to expand investment in transportation because of the job we've done. No one knows who's responsible. There's not necessarily an association with an entity for who has done the planning and has delivered this infrastructure. But compared to other parts of the country, we receive positive marks, whereas transportation is considered usually in other parts of the country negative. And so this is something that we were really excited about as we launched into our planning effort, knowing that we had a lot to build from. Next slide. So as you know, I've presented to you before, you know what's in the investment plan. Mr. Jenkins, of course, emphasized the growing investment that we did have in ITS and related investments moving forward. Next slide. But what's important to recognize is that when we do this effort, we don't just count on that dedicated half-cent sales tax. We put all funding that's available to the region on the table. So you'll see these are the threads of revenues that are available to the region in the green. You'll see the fattest ribbon there is the sales tax. It is the largest funding source. Add to that our formula funds that come to the region, as well as that small ribbon at the top. That's the highway user revenue fund, that diminishing revenue source. Used to be referred to as the gas tax. Now less than 50% of their revenues are coming from fuel taxes. All into the mix over a 25-year horizon is approximately $36.7 billion. And then when we built the investment plan, it's important to recognize every single dollar that we have projected to receive has been allocated to a project or program. And you'll see that articulated in the blue. And on the bottom, the importance of regional programs. This is something we heard early and often. It's one of the charges our mayors gave us when developing a 20 or 25-year plan. Identify those important investments that take maybe a generation worth of commitment to deliver, but also recognize things are changing fast. And so we want to be flexible, want government to be nimble into the future and be able to respond to changing needs and not inflexible as sometimes government can be. And so our strategy in dealing with that is to identify programming elements where we can set aside funding for regionally significant investments. And then through MAG's well-established call for projects process, every couple of years or so, go out, do a call for projects, identify the highest needs in the region where we're responding to growth and development and needs as they arise. Pointing out at the bottom, one of those programs, of course, that we are expanding is ITS as part of this overall funding portfolio. Next slide. Unfortunately, we are in an unprecedented circumstance now after 40 years of investment and a record that can't be beat in the state. We do not have a future funding source identified or secured at this point. After delivering the plan and working with the legislature last year to successfully pass enabling legislation, which would direct the Board of Supervisors to put this ballot on, or this question on a ballot for Maricopa County voters. Governor Doug Ducey vetoed the legislation after the 4th of July. We have been working since to try to find a new solution, as you are all quite aware, and have been endeavoring in partnership with the legislature all this year. We have worked very hard to attempt to find a solution where we're able to get to voters as soon as possible. By way of reminder, Maricopa County is the only county that does not already have standing authority to go directly to their voters for a tax initiative for transportation. All 14 other counties have the ability to go to the Board of Supervisors to go to a ballot for up to 1 cent sales tax. Next slide. So what would happen if we are unable to extend Proposition 400, or that dedicated half-cent sales tax that was first established back in 1985? We would lose more than 50% of the funding available to the region. It would decimate our ability to advance any of the plan elements. In fact, we would have to scrap the plan entirely, and the funding sources that we have remaining would be focused singularly on critical safety matters and rehabilitation efforts. As you know, federal funding all has strings attached to it as well, so it'll limit our ability to maximize opportunities. And more importantly, perhaps in light of the historic investment Washington, D.C. has made with IIJA, talking and referencing to your first agenda item today, we will not be able to pursue any of those funding opportunities. Proposition 400 serves as our local match, and we have been enormously successful in this region on discretionary funding opportunities. And we're no better positioned, having just finished, of course, our long-range plan now, to beat out our partners in other states and regions. Unfortunately, without the extension of Proposition 400, those dollars will be going to our competitors. Next slide. So I wanted to end with where we sit in terms of the policymaking process. Next slide. I think it's important to first start with a little bit of a reminder on what enabling legislation does. As I mentioned already, we do not have standing authority in the county to go directly to the Board of Supervisors to ask for a continuation. That authority must be given by the legislature. And so our bill is a very technical bill and very complex. And so I wanted to use this opportunity just to provide some context on what it actually does. Next slide. First, it provides and authorizes a countywide ballot. Next. It puts into law our new plan element, the Regional Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Investment Plan. And that's the document that guides the projects and programs funded by the sales tax that differs from the Regional Transportation Plan, which covers the entirety of our planning region, including Pinell County. Next slide. It calls to allocate 100% of the sales tax revenues that comes in as collected by the Department of Revenue, and whom points then that funding to our two implementing partners, the Arizona Department of Transportation through the Regional Area Road Fund and Valley Metro through the Public Transit Fund. Next slide. Prescribes the process for making changes to this plan. It's important to recognize over 20 years, things change. When you look at Proposition 400 and 300, things change. And specifically with Proposition 400, the Great Recession was devastating. We lost 10 years of revenue. That meant we had to push out half the plan out of the funding horizon, as many of your cities are very well aware. And so when change happens, we need to be able to reflect that. And we have a discrete process where we include our partners in that process, as well as a robust public engagement process. Next slide. Makes administrative updates, including recognizing the size difference in Maricopa County, increasing that threshold. Next slide. And it affirms the Transportation Policy Committee's role in development and updates to the plan. By way of reminder, the Transportation Policy Committee was formed by MAG in the early 90s to help develop the plan that ultimately led to Proposition 400. It was later codified in state statute as a specific entity responsible for plan development and implementation. It includes 6 members appointed by the legislature of the business community, intended to be a public-private partnership, recognizing the important role that Maricopa County does play relative to the state. We wanted to ensure that that TPC is reaffirmed in statute. Next slide. And then I think this is the important part this year, many other additional legislative intents. Our bill has grown. And I would also acknowledge we've had several bills this year introduced by members of the legislature, all with different colors of interests and legislative intent. And so a lot of our energy has been focused on partnering with members, individual members who have interest in this topic, providing education information on what our investments are, what is ITS, explaining the value of those sorts of investments. And I think in particular, focusing on some programs that we have here, which has gotten a lot of scrutiny by the members of the legislature with interest in removing them from the plan. Next slide. So the 2 bills that are still active are Senate Bill 1246. It's a strike everything bill introduced by Representative Cook. This is a underlying bill of Mr. Farnsworth. These are both of the Transportation Committee chairs in the House and Senate. This bill has passed out of committee as well as the Rules Committee. Another bill, Senate Bill 1102, is also a strike everything. This has been introduced by Mr. Livingston. The underlying bills of Mr. Carroll's. Mr. Carroll was our bill sponsor last year of the successful enabling legislation that was vetoed by the governor. That bill has passed out of the Appropriations Committee. While both bills have a lot of the underlying infrastructure we need to implement our plan, to reinforce MAG's planning authority, as well as our relationships with our 2 implementing partners, ADOT and Valley Metro, there are issues with both for which MAG cannot yet support. Neither bill matches the plan allocations of funding, which are 37.4% for freeways, 22.2% for arterials and those regionally significant programs. That includes ITS, and then 40.4% for transit. And both bills, to varying degrees, contain provisions that impede implementation of the plan. The direction your mayors have given us from the beginning, as we have negotiated in good faith with the legislature for a bill that we can get across the finish line, is can it implement the unanimously adopted and air quality conformant plan? That is the provisions for which we have been using as negotiation. And unfortunately, neither of these bills do that quite yet. Next slide. So I want to end on this slide, acknowledging that Transportation Policy Committee you see here pictured. This is from June of 2021, as Mr. Jenk had referenced. This is the day the Transportation Policy Committee, that statutorily prescribed entity, unanimously recommended adoption of the Transportation Infrastructure Investment Plan, a day that we're really proud of. It comes back to our leadership in this matter. I want to acknowledge your mayors in particular, who have been shoulder and shoulder, unified in this endeavor, working independently with legislators, answering the call for questions. This is an effort that is taking a considerable amount of energy and courage, and I want to acknowledge your staff support internal to each of your organizations, which I know is instrumental to supporting your own mayors, who are standing out in front, leading from the front, recognizing how important this matter is, not just for us in Maricopa County, but quite frankly, the economic prosperity and future for the state of Arizona. So Mr. Jenk, that completes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, Prop 400 extension is clearly one among the region's top priority, and I'm truly grateful that Ms. Thomas could spearhead this effort. And we thank you for this update, much needed.
I just had one question. I know that you mentioned the two bills. So are those the only two bills that you know of that anyone is even working on at all right now?
Mr. Chair, members of ITS committee, we've had over 8 bills actually through the session. Those are the 2 that are remaining alive. In the legislative session, obviously there are certain timeframes for which bills are active or still alive. These are the 2 that are currently still alive.
All right. The only reason I'm curious is just because obviously whatever bill comes out, it sounds like there will be some compromise. So it'll be interesting to see what that will be, I guess.
I have a quick question, just curious. The current tax ends in 2025, is that correct? And then, so what happens if something isn't in place by the time it ends? Then we no longer have an extension, we have to have a new, I mean, is that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that's a fantastic question. One of the very intentional things we've done is timing of the plan development process and enabling legislation. We'd worked obviously over the last 5 years, we'd planning before that with the intent of having enabling legislation last year and a vote. That was very intentional, in part because we wanted a continuation of the tax. If we have a lapse that has immediate consequences to transit service, first of all, as you know, you can't turn transit on and off. And as I've already mentioned, Proposition 400 is a fundamental funding source for regional transit service operating today. But what that would ultimately also trigger is a new tax, and that has different provisions, more stringent provisions, and some constitutional implications for which now will be an additional challenge for which the region will have to manage. I will say, just as a underlying emphasis, without the continuation of Proposition 400, that is a instrumental funding source for the Arizona Department of Transportation, Valley Metro, and MAG. So you've heard some conservative talk coming from our leadership here at MAG, recognizing that how valuable the extension is to the work we do, not just the fun stuff, all of it. And so I think that's a real wake-up call in terms of recognizing just how important this funding source is to the work that comes through this committee, as you're already well aware, but when it comes to all regional transportation investments, just how fundamental it is.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
And just one more comment. This is actually more probably for Jeff or, MAG than anyone else, but feel free to answer if there's there. But so obviously there will be some initiatives if they carry on between the 2 years. Nothing can be guaranteed. So I assume there would be a bit of a hesitation until something passes in continuing some of those initiatives.
Mr. Chairman, members of ITS committee, absolutely. So until we have a positive vote, we can't actually work on or develop any of the new programs for which we had anticipated. With this funding, I hear from a lot of technical staff, including those here at MAG, my friends, wondering when they can start talking about and developing those new programs identified in the plan, because the programs in particular are probably the highest of scrutiny right now down at the legislature, along with all the transit investments. we cannot bet on anything until we have a positive vote from the public. And so no program development for the future is going to occur until we have a positive vote from the public.
Mr. Chair, members of the ITS committee, just wanted to mention we have a hand up from Marshall Regal, and in the responses, please make sure to speak into the microphone. Thank you. Marshall?
Yes, members of the committee, chair, what effect will Prop 132 have on the next potential ballot for this extension?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, can you remind me what Prop 132 is? Is that the 60% threshold?
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, members of ITS committee. So in addition to the challenges I've already articulated, in November, there were a few other provisions passed at a state ballot that have potential implications. I am lucky to have brought on a legal team that has helped us on several matters, including the implications of the November ballot initiatives. The 60% threshold, from our perspective at this point in time, only applies to statewide efforts. This is a county referred ballot, at least in terms of the legislative actions that we are taking now. And we do not believe that it would apply, but our legal team continues to evaluate those options. Any solution outside of the legislative process for us would have to occur at a statewide initiative level, in which case that would then potentially apply.
A follow-up question, do you see organizations like the Goldwater Institute potentially muddying the waters or filing lawsuits with respect to your interpretation? And how could that affect this whole process?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we have a fantastic legal team that we have brought on as part of this effort from the beginning, and always we want to make sure that our litigious risk is as small as possible. I'd be happy to follow up with that question offline.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Audra. Don't think there's any more questions. So thank you very much for your presentation. We'll go on to item number 7, which is an update on the recent MAG ICM planning study. I'd like to invite Jeff Jink to provide an overview of this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, member of ITS committee. The ICM was one of the priority project identified in the MAG SMNO plan approved by the Regional Council back in 2018. And we have been on and off discussing this project in the last few years, and in recognizing the regional effort going on concerning Loop 101 and other. So as of last November, that we decided to start this planning process, and the decision has been we will do it in 2 phases. The first phase, in consultation with the Loop 101 team, we understand where the boundaries are and where are the opportunity that we might be able to assist with the regional efforts. So this is the 2 phase. The first phase, today you will hear the finding out of this first phase effort, which is a assessment, a regional assessment per se. So that we have ITERIS and Tricia Bauer here, and they went to the region talking to all the jurisdictions and presented some underlying traffic and safety data, and to facilitate a discussion on where some of the ICM needs will be. So this is the first phase effort, and I want to mention that out of this effort that we are currently proceeding with the second phase, which is actually doing something. And I will let Ms. Boer to present the finding, and then I will share the plan for the phase 2 with you after the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, today I'd just like to cover a few of the highlights of this assessment and then address a few of the common comments we got either during the agency meetings or to the draft assessment. And then, as Jeff said, I'll turn it back to him for next steps with phase 2. Next slide, please. So the main tasks in phase 1 was the regional assessment, local agency meetings, and then a summary of those findings. This was a pretty quick timeline. We met with 15 agencies in February, delivered a draft assessment findings document at the end of March, and the final assessment findings was submitted last week. Next slide, please. In terms of crashes for the region, MAG supplied the crash data for the freeway segments. The limits are pretty much the MAG planning region and then some extents along I-10 to the west and to the south. Here is a graph showing all of the incidents. So there was 141,000 incidents. These are all types of incidents from fatal down to possible injury. You can see that the fatal color barely shows up on the graph. So the fatals are the smallest amount, but those are the most traffic impactful on a freeway, almost always resulting in a full closure. And this chart is divided by direction. So I know it's hard to read, but if there's a 0 after the roadway segment name, that indicates whether it was southbound, either southbound or westbound. So I-10 is at the top there with the biggest number of incidents. It's also the longest segment that we had included, though. Next slide, please. So there were 394 fatal crashes, and that's really where our focus was. The first map that flashed there was just a spot map of every incident. This is more of a heat map view, but you kind of see from both maps, there's not really a aha spot. This is where we need to focus. Yes, there's heat in some segments, but those are long segments. It's not, this milepost is really where all the crashes are happening. So that, solidifies the approach Meg is taking to, we're looking at all of Loop 101. We're looking at large segments of freeway for solutions. Next slide, please. This is how the crashes break down by agency. The largest piece there is Phoenix. That's really not surprising because Phoenix has the biggest amount of freeways in their jurisdiction. The next biggest slice is unknown. And that really just comes from how the incident was coded. So this map here, the orange dots indicate the unknown locations. So you can see they're far out on I-10 to the west or to the south, or they're along the 101 where maybe the jurisdictional boundaries are a little unclear for the first responders. So this is a big chunk, but it really just comes down to how the incident was reported. Next slide, please. The next piece was a traffic assessment. So prior to our meetings with each agency, we utilized Iteris's Clear Guide platform to go back and review some past incidents. We're able to pull up the traffic data for those incidents and see where detours happened, how long the backups lasted, the extent of things. So we reviewed some examples of those incidents with each agency, whether they're incident or planned closures. We kind of talked through both with the agencies and got feedback on, does this, obviously you guys aren't going to remember every single incident, but some of them are very memorable. This one on I-10 that lasted almost all day was pretty much in the forefront of your guys' minds. So, just able to talk through what changes did you make? Did they work? Did you have to, make multiple changes? Those kind of things. We also utilized Clear Guide to look at some reoccurring congestion and look at weekday peak delay to identify some areas that maybe would be more vulnerable to a full closure because they're already experiencing heavy congestion and delay. Next slide, please. So we did that by basically creating some routes inside ClearGuide and running some delay reports. We basically included all of the freeway segments, but we excluded Loop 101 since that already has the Loop 101 mobility project as a major focus. The routes kind of differ in lengths from 4 miles to 8 miles, but kind of just cut the limits at areas of, segments of freeway that kind of operate similarly. So you can see in red, those are locations that experience the highest delay per mile. So again, the lengths differed, but we did normalize it to a delay per mile. So it's I-10 segments there that had the most amount of delay, and we did look at AM, PM, and peak period. This was for a month's worth of data. Basically just picked the most recent month that could be considered normal. I didn't want to include spring break. Super Bowl is included in there because can't avoid all the events, but this was February 6th to March 6th, basically. Next slide, please. All right, key takeaways. Basically, these are things that every agency said. So all agencies want to be notified whether they do something or not. Across the board, ARID usage is down. So only 2 agencies said that they use it a lot in real time for the emails. 2 others have it on their TMC. Most others go look at it after the fact to confirm, or maybe they've already heard about it for something else. ADOT staff did say their standard operating procedures include notifying local agencies, but that call is made to the local PD. Local PD rarely calls back to the TOC or TMC of the local agency. So there's no traffic operations type conversation having there in the initial contact. So I think that was a key. Those 2 second and third bullets are kind of the key gaps, I think. The responses do vary, but these are all related to signal ops, right? So there's a table here, but we're not talking about local agencies calling out barricade trucks or sending, any sort of incident response. It's all kind of secondary to the crash, helping the detour routes. And the kind of extent to which the response is very heavily related to how much staff you have. And I think that's a given. And again, do nothing was, I kind of had to tell everybody, it's okay for you to say you do nothing. Sometimes there's nothing to do. Sometimes the extent of the closure is there's no way you can help it anyway. But we had quite a vary of responses from we run it free, we run a different plan, we run dynamic max, we just let adaptive take care of it, we run a secondary adaptive plan to allow a higher cycle length. But again, those are all kind of variations of the same. And there's a few agencies that do have the staff that they can continuously monitor and just manually command, or they manually command for a bit and then let a plan take over. So some varied responses, but all in that, adjusting signal timing frame. Okay, next slide. Oh, back to ARIS. Sorry, you're right, Omar. The timing on my slides went faster than it felt like in the practice. So, McDOT does have quite a few projects underway or upcoming to upgrade the regional system. And a lot of those include ARIS enhancements. So ARIS 2.0, adding the arterial CCTV, integrating the Tempe CAD data. So, McDOT is aware that usage is kind of down and they're, making some great efforts to improve ARIS. Okay, next slide, please. So we did identify some specific areas that could be identified for future. These were all given to us by you guys. These all came out of the agency's conversations. We don't have to go through every one, but they kind of worked out into 2 categories, some flushing plans, and whether that be just interchange flushing plans or the detour route flushing plans, and coordination. So, either talking to each other or, having one agency let the neighboring agency know, hey, I'm flushing all this traffic to you. we're running a plan, you might need to be running a plan, things like that. So those are the two major categories that all of the outcomes kind of fell into. So with that, I'll hand it back to Jeff.
Great. Thank you, Tricia, for this is a great presentations. Granted, the phase one is a precursor of the actual planning that we're going to do. And it was a short fuse effort. Thank to you and your team for being able to do this in such a short time frame. With this finding that we are currently pursuing with the actual planning activity based on this last slide, that we learned that flushing plan or flush plan are needed regardless automation or not. And we learned that from things like I-10 Broadway curve constructions, right? It's convenient to have someone to develop some timing plan in anticipation of certain type of closures. Even Kathy's adaptive systems, it require a good set of time of day as a starting point. So we saw that as a basic necessity. And so with the phase two, there are going to be 2 projects out of the ITS on-call contract using our currently list of qualified ITS on-call consultants. The first project is just to develop the flushing plan. So just want to annotate on what flushing plan means. We know the individual traffic signal timing plan for a location. But when you look at the whole stretch, and they had a certain intent of diverting traffic in certain directions, and altogether that is a flushing plan. So based on Tricia's efforts, that we have some initial understanding of where those opportunities are in her effort talking to the 15 agencies. The second project coming up, we tried to address the coordination issue, but we knew that the Loop 101 initiative, they are taking a deeper look into through a more formal process such as DSS, which is going to take some time to come to fruition. So the second project that we're pursuing is some kind of pilot with a limited scale, allowing us to experiment a couple of essential functions that would have been needed in the DSS, such as when we say notification, what does that mean? And is there any basic requirement and all that? So we're looking at this pilot of being the second ICM project. Out of it, we're gonna learn the useful information that could be used into the procurement and development of the Loop 101 DSS. So that's, and I'd like to thank Tricia for her excellent work. This is much needed. It help us, guide us to devise the second phase effort. With that, I'd love to entertain any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you, Tricia, for the update. And thank you, Jeff. We'll move on to item number 8. Are there any requests by a committee member for an item on a future agenda? And as always, feel free to follow up with myself or with Jeff after the meeting if you do have any ideas. With that, we'll move to item number 9. Beginning with Albert, I would like to invite members to share information related to ongoing ITS related project activities in their jurisdictions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of updates regarding some CMAQ funded projects through the ITS committee. We did just complete the solicitation project for our GPS based emergency vehicle preemption. The negotiations with the
top-ranked solution company are underway. So I'm hopeful that that contract will be signed here shortly, and I have more to update regarding that project here in the next meeting. And then we did just get our project initiation letter completed through ADOT for our network switch upgrade project. So that should be underway. That's an FY25 project. So that's a procurement only project. So that one should be pretty streamlined. And again, I will update the committee as that progresses. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert. Mike?
I'll just kind of follow along those lines. Some of the last FMNO funded projects, we did get that all through council. I believe it's back with ADOT for signature, and so they should be advertising some of that in the not too distant future, which is mostly equipment procurement. You know, overall, there are a few little variations, but anyway, so that is moving along. That's all.
Thank you. Bruce?
For our ITS projects, to mirror what others have already said, the fiber on Indian School is near completion. The same with Baseline. We're starting the design on the next one for 7th Street, and then the follow-up, that'll be 91st Ave. It'll be a joint that'll go across from 83rd and McDowell, and then down 91st all the way down to Lower Buckeye. And we'll be in coordination with McDOT and Towson, and we are working on those and appear to be on schedule.
Update for Peoria as well. Our TIP funded adaptive procurement on Lake Pleasant Parkway is out advertised right now through ADOT. And we're also in the early stages of our Deer Valley adaptive, just starting with the initiation letter with ADOT and getting started. That's a 2024 project. So with that, we'll move on. Kathy.
Yeah, I don't have too much to report. We just got our initiation letter from ADOT to kick off our update to our TMC, mostly changing the screens and a couple other things. We've had it's been in place for a while, so we're doing a little update.
Ward.
We've had our Dysart area project since late 2019, and we're finally receiving components for that. Hopefully the installation will start here probably in about a month and be completed by the end of the calendar year. We also have a EVP rebuild or replacement project citywide that is in the design phases now, and hopefully have that completed by the end of June, and go forward with bids and stuff this summer. And that's about it.
Thank you, Ward. Sergeant Hunt.
Yes, sir. I'd like to extend my appreciation to Kieran Jordan with Federal Highways and Dave Blue with ADOT. Kieran facilitated a peer exchange program with Colorado. So Colorado sent out representatives from their DOT, the lieutenant colonel from the Highway Patrol, some of their staff, as well as NHTSA. Last week, we hosted them for 2 days. They toured ADOT facility and McDOT facility. They learned about our programs for traffic management and how we applied that to the TIM model. So it was a very successful exchange. They were very happy to be here, and we were happy to host them. So thanks to Federal Highways for facilitating that.
Thank you, Sergeant Hunt. Omar, could you go ahead and call those on the phone?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the ITS committee. Tony Abo, City of Glendale.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of quick updates. We have a couple of projects. One of them was the deployment of switches and cameras, and we're more than well, I would say we're more than or close to about halfway through that project. We have 136 switches that have been deployed and 55 cameras. We are still waiting on the detection for both the Glendale Avenue and the 59th project. I know that was procured through ADOT, and we should be getting that hopefully by the the end of August or sometime in August. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up is we're working with Peoria also on making some adjustments to the adaptive system or the rhythm adaptive system on Olive and Bell Road, and hopefully we'll both us and Peoria will have something to report on the future as far as the changes that were made, and that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Tony. Susan Anderson, ADOT.
Hey, good morning, everyone. On the ADOT side, just want to give an update for the Loop 101 mobility project. Quick reminder for those that are stakeholders, we do have a meeting coming up in person down at the ADOT offices on Tuesday, May 9th. So hoping everyone will at least be sure to send a representative. This is a big meeting, getting everybody all back together, going over kind of the status of the project, where we're at, and definitely where we're going to be going. Particularly some decision-making that needs to be made surrounding the decision support system. So look forward to having everyone there. Thank you much.
Micah Henry, City Mesa.
Hi, everybody. Only update is we are getting ready to deploy a fleet of vision video detection systems that we are configuring to be able to count as well as detect. And we're working with the contractor to make sure that it gets deployed accurately. So that's the only update for Mesa.
Alyssa Dahl, City of Chandler.
No updates from us. Thank you.
Hong Ho, City of Scottsdale.
Good morning, everybody. We are going to send out the post signal equipment upgrade project solicitation document soon. So that will include the upgrading our detection system and also the cabinets. Should be out there in the next couple of weeks. That's it. Thank you.
David Lucas, McDott.
Morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Two items to report today. One is that McDOT's ITS devices and communications equipment contract 180252-C is coming up for renewal, and a new solicitation that will be going out. We do have cooperative language, and it is a contract that's used by several of our local partners. So if there are devices or equipment that are not currently included that you would like to see included, or vendors that are not listed on there, please reach out to me as soon as possible with that information so that we can get that included in the update. The other announcement is that we do have two new positions which are advertised. One is for an ITS network engineer, and another is for an ITS technology engineer. Those have both been promoted through IT and the ITS Arizona website. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Marshall Regal, Town of Queen Creek.
Yeah, no updates for this month.
Thank you. Raquel Schatz, City of Apache Junction.
Yeah, no updates from the City of Apache Junction.
John Kraft, Pinal County.
No updates. Thank you.
Tessa Wessel, City of El Mirage.
Nothing to report from El Mirage.
John Willett, City of Buckeye.
Yeah, good morning. A couple of things. Our video camera update project is completed, all wrapped up. At least I assume it has been, because we received our money from ADOT. Second thing is our other project was to do conduit and fiber on Yuma and Verado. Reopens this Friday. When it opened in November, the costs were too high, so we redesigned it and changed it to micro duct and microfiber. So hopefully that brought the price down. Other than that, non-pure ITS stuff, the Watson Road TI interchange opened up last week, and I was told that some of the restrictions on I-10 will start being limited. There'll be 3 lanes, hopefully almost all the way to Watson by the end of next week for those of you who like to venture out west. But overall, that project should wrap up by the end of May, early June. and remove those traffic restrictions. And we still have our position open for a senior civil traffic engineer. I think that's and you're done, tired of listening to me. So have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Dr. Shaisang Zhu, Arizona State University.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I want to give a few updates. Thanks to all these committees' support, we invite a number of our members in this community to give guest lectures to our AT students at the ASU, including I have the special thanks to Mike Hunt, Surgeon Mike Hunt, give a great presentation on the safety aspect. We have also Marty from Valley Metro talk about the latest development on the Valley Metro and many systems. I believe I want to highlight our classroom just next to the Valley Metro station. So our students really enjoy this ITS plus public transportation aspect. We also have John Robert from ADOT, Adam, Karen from ADOT. We also pay a field trip to the Tempe TMC. We have another field trip last week at our I-10 Broadway curb project. And so thank you so much for all this support. I do invite a number of other speakers, but due to their busy schedule, for example, Jeff here. So I do expect I will invite many of you, to come to our great classrooms next semester. Thank you.
Thank you. Marty Zeke, Valley Metro.
Just a quick staffing update. I was recently promoted to the manager of capital planning position. I do intend on staying on this committee, but we are going to be backfilling that position. So we'll be putting a requisition out soon for a principal planner, and that position will be involved with any ITS work that Valley Metro does. So if you know anyone who's interested in transit as it relates to ITS and different capital projects, please refer them to our website. That'll be coming out soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Congratulations. Kieran Jordan, FHWA.
Just a reminder that the CMM workshop for the MAG region will take place on May 31st, and it will be a half-day workshop.
Thank you, Kieran. Is there anyone I have missed?
Hey, thank you for the updates. The next meeting of the Intelligent Transportation Committee will be on Wednesday, June 7th at 10 a.m. With no further business, today's meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.